Donald Trump, American Karma. Welcome to Law and Society. Please subscribe. Today I want to talk to you about the esoteric idea of karma and how that relates to Donald Trump on this 250th anniversary of the birth of our nation through our first breath and cry, the Declaration of Independence. So what is karma? Karma, very simply put, is the nature of consequences. It is the embodiment of action and consequence that has been happening from the beginning of time to the end of time. It doesn't consider the negative or positive. Karma, whether it's good or bad, is a linear path of consequences. So one example that I like to give is, say for example, you go to buy a plot of land, and you buy a plot of land, and you say, oh, we're going to build our house there, and I would like to plant this particular land. I will plant myself an oak tree in the middle of it to give it a symbol that this is my land. Now, the oak tree from the acorn grows into a mighty oak. And in the meantime, while the tree is growing, you plan on building a home on that land. But as you are building a home and you build the home, the roots of the oak tree bind around your home. And maybe parts of the oak tree break certain parts of your home because it is now a mighty oak that's growing with its roots underneath your house, that is tangling itself with the foundations. Now, if one day, for example, the oak tree's roots break through the foundations and compromise a certain part of your house, to you, it's a regressive thing. Like, oh, you built the house, now you have to repair and build it again. But the nature of consequences is that your karma of deciding that this land is yours was your action. It has the consequence of you keeping the land. You planting that acorn there is an action. You building a house there is another action, and every single one of those actions has consequences. I mean, throwing that acorn there with the hope that it would grow is a karma that you don't know whether it will happen or not. And that depends on the nature of consequences that happen as a matter of natural going. Like, okay, the acorn actually does take root and plants itself as opposed to being eaten by a squirrel. That would also be nature and the trick of karma, where the karma is done by the squirrel, and whether there is sentience there is a whole different philosophical conversation, but it is an action that precipitates a set of consequences. And in the scenario where the squirrel takes and eats the acorn, the consequence is that you won't have an oak tree that you wanted to have, but you also will have a house that won't be tangled by the roots of the oak tree because you didn't think forward enough to consider planting the oak tree or the acorn in a place that would not interfere with your house. So that is the nature of consequences and karma, is that it tangles itself up over the course of time. And every karma piles on top of the other, and the consequence of previous karmas shoot out from underneath and, show up as growing plants. Even when there is dirt put on top of it, it's a layer of karma, layer of karma, layer of karma, layer of karma. And then the consequence of a previous karma offshooting from those layers of karma and creating a playing field that is completely different than what the the karmic playing field was for years and years and years of a certain place or certain time. And so, why is Trump America's karma? Because from the time that America started, even before the Declaration of Independence, when colonists came and they exploited the land, when they were prejudiced against the native people, when there was ugliness in our history of enslavement and slavery, and all of the ugliness that were consequences of actions, of karma taken by people, all of that is layered on top of one another. None of it goes away. None of it goes away. And it surfaces at times when that karma is meant to resurface back up, when that plant from underneath the ground breaks ground and comes up to the top, so you see the nature of the consequences. And Donald Trump is America's karma because he embodies the nature of the consequences that America has to reap as a necessary evil to reap, because we have sown these grains, we have sown these seeds in our past. And we are now seeing what the implication and what the consequences are of us planting those seeds in our past, and how Donald Trump embodies the karmic conglomeration of every action that has preceded his presidency or his rise 10 years ago. America laid the playing field that was fertile for somebody like Donald Trump to come and make that karma break ground and show up. So the ugliness that we're seeing now is a consequence of cumulative American action. And this action doesn't have to be good or bad. Mind you, karma isn't about good or bad. It is about action. If it wasn't for the enslavement of African Americans, there would be no freeing of African Americans. Those actions come as a consequence of the previous action. So we, as a people, have to rectify these karmas based on our society at our time and at our place. So we today have to deal with the karma of past generations that have planted root in our fertile ground of our democracy. And we have to be able to snip the karmic bounds that we have been bounded and shackled by to the ground, to free ourselves, to let the karmic consequences come up and be cured. That's what it means for America to have karma coming to teach us again what we did, why we did it, why we shouldn't have, what we should do now, and which direction we should go. Karmic consequences inform how human beings move in life, not as a nature of anything, but just the linear progress of time and the nature of choices we make with certain things, whether that be enslavement, whether that be persecution, or whether that be equality, and whether that be egalitarian system based on merit. These are all karmic actions that pile on top of one another. It doesn't erase the previous actions, but it builds upon it. It cures it. It clips and stems it. So that the karma that is ultimately produced when that oak tree goes up in the right place of your lot, so it doesn't interfere with the foundations of your home and yet gives you the shade of a mighty oak. It brings into question the idea of responsibility, the idea of doing things the right way, of knowing the nature of consequences and allowing your mind to spool and unspool the possibilities of your actions. And that's why before we take any action, it is important for us to deliberate on those actions, to think about those actions, to think about the consequences of those actions. Because if we don't think about the consequences of those actions, not just one step removed, but 6 to 7 steps removed from us, we run the risk of creating a karmic sort of tanglement that future generations have to cure, clip, and stem in order to keep going at the pace in the linear structure of time in order to keep our society from rupturing. So instead of seeing these karmic things come up, instead of seeing our ugliest demons pop up because of the fertile ground that Donald Trump has provided, the layer of fertilizer on top of the ground that now feeds the consequences of our past actions, we have the chance to see where these misplaced or just, consequentially placed or thrown in by a bird who decides to eat a wild berry, and there's a berry tree in the middle of your building lot. It is all of those consequences, intended and unintended. And if we as a country can manage that, if we as a country can reconcile, we as a country can repair and rebuild, if we as a country can cure these mistakes, we rise up stronger than we would have been had we been entangled and left to obstruct one another. It's meant to conflict with one another as opposed to live cohesively with one another. These are choices that we have as people, because we are, to our knowledge, the only sort of sentient beings who have particularized intentions that can be pointed and that can be focused on action that reaps consequences that are desired down the road, as opposed to consequences that are unforeseen down the road. So this time gives Americans time for pause and time to think about how do we change our system and build so that we can unobstructively move forward as a nation and rise and be strong instead of being in a place where we can be cut down. Or we have to be cut down because not doing so is a detriment to the general idea of existence or of humanity. So I hope that I've given you an idea of what karma is. It's not an easy concept to grasp, but very simply put, it is a nature of consequences that's extrapolated from the beginning to the end of time, where no action disappears, but rather reaps, whether intentionally or unintentionally from the human perspective. But it is action nonetheless, and it has consequences nonetheless. And that's something we, as sentient beings, should be aware of as we make decisions going forward, as individuals, but also as part of a republic where the government is for, of, and by the people. It's important for us to remember that. And that is why I call this American karma. Because it is a consequence of our actions that we today have to be mindful of as we move forward in curing and redeveloping and rising above our ugliest demons that Donald Trump has made so obvious for us and the rest of the world. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you soon.